What is the European Three Seas Initiative? The Three Seas Initiative summit took place in Warsaw on the same day that US President Trump expressed his support for this joint Polish-Croatian project. It began in 2016 and aims to strengthen ties between 12 countries bordering the Adriatic, Baltic and Black Seas. EU representatives weren't invited. The leaders of Croatia, Bulgaria and Estonia later participated in the debates at the Global Forum and were asked, is this an infrastructure or a political project?
This is an informal presidential platform that provides the framework for these discussions. We intend to have no secretariat, no headquarters or anything like that, so no bureaucracy, and it actually depends on, I would say, enthusiastic people in the government who want to bring about a better life for all of our citizens, to increase the living standards in all of our countries. This is an initiative that is not aimed against anyone. Not against the European Union, not against Germany, not against Russia. This is not a American Trojan horse in Central Europe. It's not a cordon sanitaire towards Russia. This is an initiative it's for a better life, for better living standards, for all of our citizens and the competitiveness of our economies, which will contribute to the cohesion of the European Union as a whole, and which will, I believe, contribute to the competitiveness of the European Union as well.
Yet there are many more questions remaining, for instance, who is included and who is not. As we know, there are countries in the Three Seas region, such as Ukraine and some of the Balkan states, that are not involved. So there was the question to the presidents, and that's their answer.
I would like to actually try to separate two separate issues in Ukraine, which one of them is Ukrainian territorial integrity, for which we need to stand. The other side of the coin is obviously our own red line, which has in principle not much to do with Ukrainian state. It's the same red line which we, Western countries, failed to draw in Georgia in 2008, where the Georgian war happened. The Western retaliation was extremely weak. It was back to business as usual in months. We taught a lesson. Now, if people tell me that sanctions are not functioning, for example, because Crimea is still occupied and there is little hope that this conflict could be solved quickly, and look what's going on in Donbass, then I always say, how come you don't see what we are actually doing there is keeping our own red line? And yes, sanctions are functioning because there have been no further steps somewhere in Balkans, in Transnistria, whatever. And this is a totally different issue. It is not the Ukrainian issue. It's protecting our liberal democratic values of nations to decide, not to be subjected to the will of the bigger, economically more powerful nations.
So certainly we're open and willing to talk to Russia in any way that they want. And I don't think that we need to explain ourselves to anyone, but certainly openness and transparency is also one of the features of this initiative. Now, on cooperation with non-EU member states, a lot of the projects would be rather complicated because the funding that we're looking at mostly is for the EU member countries. However, I think that there is genuine will on the part of all of the presidents to see what we can do with the non-EU member countries to assist them and to connect with them in terms of infrastructure as well.
I think that Europe faces a huge problem in the Ukrainian crisis. That's why, of course, within NATO, we should continue to develop and sustain defense and deterrence capabilities. But we should always stay open to a dialogue with Russia. This dialogue is substantially important because we should avoid any risk, we should avoid any escalation.
Polish analyst Katarzyna Pisarska, founder and director of the European Academy of Diplomacy in Warsaw, about the relations between the Three Seas Initiative and the EU, what the initiative means for regional energy politics, and the potential for the involvement of non-EU members, such as Ukraine. There is a summit of 3C. It's about 12 countries from Baltic to the Baltic Sea, Adriatic Sea, and the Black Sea. So there will be the question on why particularly this. We have a larger region, but in the beginning, so how do you see that? Why you see this initiative is kind of going not really within the EU? They try to put that it's not about the having some kind of another line, but still, what is that?
First of all, let me be very clear. There will be no Free Seas initiatives outside of the EU framework, both for political and practical reasons. The majority, if not all, of the Free Seas participants see themselves as deeply embedded in the EU and do not see this initiative as any alternative to any other countries within the European Union. Second, the economical factor. The Free Seas initiative does not have any special funds or any special mechanisms that would enhance its main priority, mainly strengthening infrastructural and transportation links between the countries, the north-south axis. All this money and all these mechanisms are within the European Union. So it is only a framework, and this is how it should be seen, of strengthening the process of a bigger cohesion within Central European countries, but this cohesion will be funded mainly by EU money, or by a number of different stakeholders coming not only from the Free Seas, but also from the entire European Union. I don't think there would be any agreement and definitely any support for the initiative if this initiative would be presented by our president as any form of alternative to, let's say, Western Europe. Today it has become a very practical, economic and digital-focused initiative, and I think that of course President Trump's visit has given it a bigger visibility, but it's only one of many formats that these countries cooperate in.
And what then would be with the energy in particular? Because what is known that those countries aren't really in much favor of the Nord Stream, and as well, some of them have dependence on, used to have or have dependence on the Russian gas.
There has been a big effort put by the European Commission and the European Union to create interconnectors also here in Central Europe between different countries for us to be able to trade and share energy resources. There are plans that are put under the Strategy 2020 by the European Commission, and there will be both funds and a political push to do this. The Free Seas initiatives builds on these processes. They are happening anyhow, they would be happening anyhow, but it's, I think, a way of politically strengthening these infrastructure and transportation projects and bringing more coordination to the table between these countries. Now, regarding gas, I mean, the market is the market is changing, yes. We know today that in 5 years, the European energy market will be completely different than it is today. LNG is one of the possible resources. It does not have to be necessarily more expensive than Russian gas, but even if it's close to the price of the Russian gas, that is already a very strong negotiation argument when we discuss the prices of gas for us with Gazprom, and that also really realistically can lower our prices, but also our gas dependence, because we can always find other sources, even if they're a bit more expensive.
And of course, because it's a Black Sea, and there are way more countries on the Black Seas, and Ukraine is the country on the Black Sea. We knew that Ukraine had, I mean, to some extent, without given the details of how the diplomacy worked, but there were ideas that could Ukraine in some way be joined or involved. And later we know there are more countries, although in the Balkans, which are not the members of EU. So what would be the answer? Because it's still not very clear unless it's publicly addressed.
Absolutely. I think if the Free Seas continues to be a strong format, and I would give it still a year to evolve, I think it should have a separate dimension involving its non-EU members. And Ukraine should be an absolute priority for Free Seas, in my opinion, but also other Balkan countries interested in joining this format. There were different considerations. I understand that were not necessarily only Polish considerations, but other members wanted to keep this as a kind of more infrastructural project, and were afraid that a presence of somebody out of the EU would give it a geopolitical dimension and would be perceived as an anti-Russian, for example, initiative. And as we know, not all countries from this group have bad relations with Russia. But I think that if the Poles and the Croatians will continue to lead this project, they should also focus on involving our neighbors, including Ukraine and other non-EU Western Balkan countries.